Yeah, we were both trying. Well, my oldest school, you know, I think they're really from Muslim, but he was scared. You know, the sound. We thought reciting at home, he gets scared. And then the little one, he said, you know what, I will go and read. You know, they want to read the longer one. He want to never something really long. He said, you don't have to. Where?
say Surah Fatiha for all the marhumin and marhumat.
Yeah. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم صدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إن نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذا أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أحلقنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون فسبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أن اطعموا من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعلمون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكس في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع مشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو خلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صلوات. Please recite Surah Fatiha for all mu'mineen inshallah.
सलवात किए है शिम्र ने दो कर एक खंजर حسین کا پوچھا بہن کی چادر سے کیے ہے شمر نے غریب زہرا یوں روتے روتے مر جاتا غریب زہرا یوں روتے روتے مر جاتا بہن اٹھا کے نہ لاتی جو لاش اکبر سے کیے ہے شمر نے کسی نے بالوں سے پکڑا کوئی اٹھا کے چلا کسی نے بالوں سے پکڑا کوئی اٹھا کے چلا سر حسین کو مارا کسی نے پتھر سے کیے ہے شمر نے اسے اٹھایا ہے بابا کی لاش سے ایسے اٹھایا ہے بابا کی لاش سے ایسے کہ پھر سکینہ نہیں سوئی شمر کے ڈر سے کیے ہے شمر نے لبے حسین پہ ہنس ہنس کے مارتا تھا چھڑی لبے حسین پہ ہنس ہنس کے مارتا تھا چھڑی یزید کھیل رہا تھا حسین کے سر سے کیے ہے شمر نے بہن کا پردہ تکلم اسے بنانا تھا بہن کا پردہ تکلم اسے بنانا تھا سنا رہا تھا وہ قرآن سینا کے منبر سے کیے ہے شمر نے دو کا ایک خنجر سے لہو حسین کا پوچھا بہن کی چادر سے صلوات
صلوات برباد ہوا باغ نبی دور خزاں سے برباد ہوا باغ نبی دور خزاں سے افسوس سفر سید بے کس کا جہاں سے شبیر لیے جاتے ہیں بے شیر کو رن میں، شبیر لیے جاتے ہیں بے شیر کو رن میں، اللہ بچانا انہیں دشمن کی ضیا سے، اللہ بچانا انہیں دشمن کی ضیا سے، شبیر لیے جاتے ہیں بے شیر کو رن میں، ایک پل میں وہ اصغر کا گلا چھیڑ کے نکلا، ایک پل میں وہ اصغر کا گلا چھیڑ کے نکلا، وہ تیر جو نکلا کسی ظالم کی کماں سے، وہ تیر جو نکلا کسی ظالم کی کماں سے، برباد ہوا باغ نبی دور خزاں سے، بچا کفنا گور کا محتاج پڑا ہے، بچا کفنا گور کا محتاج پڑا ہے، چادر بھی نہیں سر پہ کفن دوں میں کہاں سے، چادر بھی نہیں سر پہ کفن دوں میں کہاں سے، کس دل سے نکالی شہ دلگیر نے برچھی، کس دل سے نکالی شہ دلگیر نے برچھی، لپٹا کلیجہ علی اکبر کا سینہ سے، لپٹا تھا کلیجہ علی اکبر کا سینہ سے، برباد ہوا باغ نبی دور خزاں سے، شبیر چلے کہتے ہوئے ہائے رے قسمت، شبیر چلے کہتے ہوئے ہائے رے قسمت، وہ تیر پڑا مشک سکینہ کے کماں سے، برباد ہوا باغ نبی دور خزاں سے، کربل کی زمین نام کیا تو نے جہاں میں، سجدے کو لیے جھکتے ہیں سب شوکت و شان سے، برباد ہوا باغ نبی دور خزاں سے، صلوات علیہ۔
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Just a few announcements. Let's get my announcement list out here. So tonight, we will not have a night program after the Majlis, after Salat. There will not be a night program at the ISIA. We will end with Salat tonight. There might be at the Husseini Center. I'm not sure. I have to check. But there won't be any night program here at the ISIA. Second, any youngsters, teenagers, kids against the wall, please move off the wall. The wall is reserved for adults and the elderly. Muharram Fund. Actually, we'll do Iraq Humanitarian Fund first, Muhammad Ali. Thanks. We are collecting again for the Iraq Humanitarian Fund. So anybody who is able to donate, please do donate to help people in need, our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Shia brothers and sisters in Iraq. And there's all those contacts there. It's on the website as well. The Muharram Fund, we are into the last 3 nights. The official program night-wise ends on Saturday, and the Walk of Honor is on Sunday. But we have $18,625. So we're really close, 7,000 away. So let's get a big salawat for that. Allah. It's really great to see we're almost at our target. I am 100% confident that we will get to our target. This community has always met our targets in the past. We'll meet it again this year, inshallah. So please continue to donate generously. Brother Jabir will be outside after the majlis in the foyer with the square reader. So if you'd like to donate at the center, you can use debit card or credit card. We also take cash, e-transfer, as well as donations online. So please donate generously and let's get to that number so we can support our masjid and support these programs, inshallah. Just a reminder that on Sunday we do have the Walk of Honor, which will start at Al-Baqir Center and will continue to the Husseini Center. It's about an hour and 15 minutes of walking. And inshallah, there will be some other items in the program after. So please do attend if you can, inshallah, this Sunday. And with that, let's welcome Shaykh with 3 loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And before you sit down, please take a big step forward. For latecomers, they can get into the back, so please sit as close as possible. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة وهو الحكيم الخبير والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث إلى كافة الورى شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته أئمة الهدى ومصابيح الدجى الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أولئك يجزون الغرفة بما صبروا ويلقون فيها تحية وسلاما صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, tonight we will complete our discussion on the attributes of the Ibadur Rahman as listed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Furqan. We will do so by examining the 14th and final characteristic of these true, sincere servants of the All-Compassionate, and that attribute is patience. So the questions that we will seek to answer this evening are, first of all, why is patience regarded as being the most important attribute of the Ibadur Rahman? Secondly, with regard to this attribute, what can we say with regard to Allah's subhanahu wa ta'ala's description in the Quran of the person that He describes with such praise because of his patience? And then thirdly, how many types of patience are there? And then finally, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command us to be patient? So we'll begin the first of these 4 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So now, with regard to the first question, that why is patience regarded as being the most important attribute of the Ibadur Rahman? Well, when we look at the verses concerning this final attribute, verses 75 and 76 of Surah Al-Furqan, we see first of all that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about patience here and then the reward for having patience. Ulaika yudzawna al-ghurfata bima sabaru. So he says that these servants, the Ibadur Rahman, they are rewarded with lofty abodes, right? Al-ghurfa is a place which is of exalted rank in paradise. Okay, so these Ibadur Rahman are rewarded with this high-ranking place in paradise. Why? Bima sabaru, because of what they were patient, because of their patience. And then he goes on to say, وَيُلَقَّوْنَ فِيهَا تَحِيَّةً وَسَلَامًا. And they are greeted therein with salutations and peace. And in the next verse, in the final verse of the whole series, verse number 76, خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا حَسُنَتْ مُسْتَقَرًّا وَمُقَامًا. They remain there forever in those lofty places, and a beautiful abode and resting place. All right. So now that we've examined the 2 verses, let's have a look at this question. Why is patience, therefore, regarded as being the most important attribute of the Ibadur Rahman? We discussed 13 other really lofty attributes of these pure servants. Why patience? Well, the answer is that, have a look at this verse. The verse number 75, Bima sabaru. So it says that these servants are rewarded with those lofty ranking stations in the paradise because of patience. So the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala links the reward with this attribute is one of the reasons why the Mufassirin, many of them say that this is the most important attribute. Because of all of those attributes, the final one is when he links it with the reward. They get these lofty places in the akhirah bima sabaru, because of their patience. That's the first answer. The second answer that has been presented by some of the Mufassirin and exegetes of the Quran is that, well, without patience, those other 13 attributes are not possible for the Ibadur Rahman to embody. So patience, therefore, becomes absolutely critical for everyone striving for spiritual development. Now, let me illustrate this using a beautiful analogy from Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. In the Nahjul Balagha, he puts forward this really striking comparison between patience and the body. So he says that the comparison and the likeness of faith, or the relationship between patience and faith, is like the relationship between the head and the body. Okay? So the relationship between patience and faith, on the one hand, is like the relationship between the head and the body on the other hand. Why? Why is it like that? He goes on to explain. He says that just as there is no goodness in a body without a head, so too there is no goodness in faith without patience. It's a wonderful way of explaining it, that someone can live without many body parts, but they cannot live without the head. All right? So just as somebody's physical life is not possible without the head, somebody's spiritual life, their faith, is not possible without patience. So this is the relationship between the two parts. Now, as we've been doing throughout this series, we've been applying these attributes to the Ibadur Rahman, in particular those who were present on the plains of Karbala. And then from time to time, we've been giving other examples as well, either from the Quran or from pious individuals or anecdotes from the Ahadith. So now, let's have a look at the application of this. Well, with regard to the Ibadur Rahman on the plains of Karbala, of course, the greatest of the Ibadur Rahman was none other than Sayyid al-Shuhada, Aba Abdullah al-Husayn, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. And all of the Ibadur Rahman were patient right from the beginning to the end. And we saw many, many examples of their patience during the course of these majalis, and we will continue to do so over the remaining majalis. But just to give you one idea, when Sayyid al-Shuhada left Makkah, he pointed to this characteristic of patience that the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam had throughout their lives. And definitely it was something that they always had during this whole trial and tribulation. So he says that Rida Allah, Ridana Ahlul Bayt. It's a fantastic tradition which, if we can all remember it, it will really serve us well. He says that the pleasure of Allah, Rida Allah, Ridana Ahlul Bayt, is our pleasure, meaning us, the Ahlul Bayt. Then he goes on to talk about patience. Nasbiru ala bala'ih. We are patient with regard to His, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's trials and tribulations. وَيُوَفِّينَا أُجُورَ الصَّابِرِينَ. And He rewards us with the reward of the patient ones. So He's focusing on this attribute of patience right from the outset. From the time He leaves Makkah, this is His statement. Now, what is the logical conclusion with this statement? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure is really the same as the Ahlul Bayt's pleasure, then it means whatever they do attains the pleasure of Allah, isn't it? Rida Allah, Ridana Ahlul Bayt. The pleasure of Allah is the pleasure, is Ridana Ahlul Bayt, is our pleasure, the pleasure of the Ahlul Bayt. So it means whatever they do, they attain the pleasure of Allah. Whatever Allah wants them to do, they are pleased with it. Now, that means the repercussions for us is that if we therefore follow these great Ibadur Rahman by, for example, putting these 14 attributes into our lifestyles and embodying them, exemplifying them in our character, then we will have followed the Ahlul Bayt, isn't it? If we embody these qualities, we will have followed the Ahlul Bayt. If we follow the Ahlul Bayt, it means that we will also therefore attain the pleasure of Allah. Because their pleasure is the pleasure of Allah. Whatever they do, Allah is pleased with. Whatever Allah is pleased with, they do. We follow the Ahlul Bayt Logical conclusion, we therefore attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is why it's so important to always use the Ahlul Bayt as our yardstick, as our measure for evaluating our own spirituality, and to understand where we are right now, and then to realize where we must be and how to get there. They are always the measuring stick. They are always our standard, because their pleasure is Allah's pleasure. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I'd like to illustrate the importance of patience with this real story about a great mystic and master of spirituality, an arif who you've all heard about, Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi Bahjat, rahmatullah alayh. So with regard to this, I want to emphasize how important patience is, and also how essential it is for our spiritual development and to progress higher towards Allah by obeying our parents. This is really important for all of us. Inshallah, those who have parents with them still, then this is extremely important for them to bear in mind. Those of us who don't have parents with us, then at least we can appreciate what they did that little bit more. We are grateful to them, and we remember them, and we pray for them, inshallah. Okay, so Ayatollah Al-Uzma Muhammad Taqi Bahjat, this great jurist, is a marja taqleed. He was an arif as well. He didn't just have the knowledge, he had the practice as well. He's an arif, a spiritual master, a mystic. So my teacher actually reports this, and he says that Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi Bahjat, when he was in Najaf, he only studied 2 years under his spiritual master, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Qazi Tabatabai. Many of you will have heard of him. He wasn't just a mystic and an arif himself. He was the teacher of Urafa, the teacher of arifs and mystics and spiritual masters, such as Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi Bahjat and others such as Allama Tabatabai. In any case, he studied under Ayatollah Qazi for 2 years. And at that time, when they were in Najaf, his hometown, Ayatollah Bahjat's hometown, was in Fuman in Iran. And his father hears about his son attending the lessons of Ayatollah Qazi. Now, his lessons were in spiritual development and irfan and mysticism. And his father wasn't happy about this, because, especially at that time, irfan was often looked upon quite negatively. And so he writes a letter to his son, right? And Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi Bahjat, when he receives this letter, he reads it, and his father had written there that this is what has come to his attention, that he's attending these lessons, and he says to him that I am not happy for you to attend anyone's lessons except those of Ayatollah Sayyid Abul Hassan Isfahani, who was a great marja of his time. So now, Ayatollah Bahjat, what does he do? He is so thirsty. He really wants to develop spiritually, and he's getting this spiritual training from Ayatollah Qazi. So he's really, unsure. What does he do? He's very sad as well. Will he have to leave his lessons? So then he goes to Ayatollah Qazi, his teacher, and he tells him, my father has written to me, and he's really not happy me attending your lessons. What do I do? Ayatollah Qazi tells him, who's your marja taqleed? Who's your marja taqleed? And he says to him, Abul Hassan Isfahani. He says to him, go to Sayyid Abul Hassan Isfahani and ask him his opinion. What should you do? Whatever he tells you to do, do it. So now, Ayatollah Bahjat goes to his marja taqleed, Sayyid Abul Hassan Isfahani, tells him, my father has written this, he's not happy me attending Ayatollah Qazi's lessons and training on spiritual development and irfan. What do I do? Look at the response from this great marja taqleed. He says to him that this command is from your father, and therefore it is obligatory on you to obey it. And he says to him, you should leave those lessons. So Ayatollah Bahjat, he leaves those lessons. He stops attending. Now this, for such spiritual people, is like everything. That's exactly what they've always wanted. He's so unhappy about having to leave these lessons. But at the end of the day, he respects his teachers, his marja taqleed, and he performs his duty. This is the key point. He performs his duty. His duty was to obey the command of his father. He does that. He stops going to the lessons. What does Ayatollah Bahjat himself say? He says afterwards, I felt this incredible radiance in my heart. And he says that this was because I just performed my duty, which was to obey my father's command. Now, Ayatollah Mawlavi reports that Ayatollah Bahjat became Ayatollah Bahjat because he listened to the command of his father. And so somebody reports this to Ayatollah Bahjat. They say that Ayatollah Mawlavi has said that you have got where you have got to because you obeyed your father's command. Ayatollah Bahjat, in all his humility, he says that, well, I haven't got anywhere and I have nothing. But if anyone obeys their mother and father, they will attain everything. This is Ayatollah Bahjat. Because he was so patient at that time when he had to do something extremely difficult, i.e. not attend those lessons of tarbiyah and irfan of Ayatollah Qazi. But you see, my dear brothers and sisters, this is what patience is about. And we'll see the types of patience as well later on. But patience comes in all different forms, and it can really help one to develop spiritually. Just like Mawla Amir said in that tradition, it's like a body without a head. Just as a person cannot survive without a head, so too faith cannot survive without patience. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So let's move on to the second question, and that is, in the Quran, who does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describe with the highest levels of praise and why? Well, of course, the paragon of patience in the Quran is none other than Nabi Ayyub, ala nabiyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam. He's known as Job in English, and he was a prophet that was chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about 2 generations after Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. So just to give you some context as to when he was alive, about 2 generations after Prophet Yusuf. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he was, before he got to the age of 73, Nabi Ayyub, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed him with abundance and blessings and all types of really amazing things in terms of his wealth, and his health was good, his family, everything Nabi Ayyub had. Then from the age of 73, things start going downhill very, very rapidly, and to such an extent that it is really difficult for us to imagine someone being in such hardship. So for about 7 years, from 73 to 80 years of age, Nabi Ayyub experienced all the losses that normally we would love for us to not have, and we would always value such things. So things like wealth, he lost his wealth. Things like health, his health was lost completely. His family, his children, his crops, his trees, and he was even turned out by the people of his town. So all of these things that a normal human being values really highly, their wealth, their health, their family, their reputation, all of these things were all taken away from Nabi Ayyub. Now, Shaitan was the instigator of all of this. And just to give you one example, what Shaitan did to him, right? Shaitan actually burnt all of his crops, he burnt his trees, he burnt his shepherds who were working for him, and he burnt his home. When Shaitan burnt his home, his whole house collapsed and it crushed his children to death. All of these calamities and tragedies that befell Nabi Ayub, what impact did they have on him? Well, we are told that actually the more he was tried and tested, the more he would praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in one of the statements that we have, he says, Alhamdulillahi alladhi a'ata. That means all praise belongs to He who gives. But then he also says, Walhamdulillahi alladhi akhadh. And all praise belongs to He who takes back. It's truly inspirational for us to look at this example of Nabi Ayub. He praises God for everything that he's been given. It all belongs to God. It's all from God anyway. And therefore he praises God when God takes it back. It all belongs to God. It was all from God anyway. So now, what happens is, when he gets to the age of 80, that is really the time when now, up to here, he had never complained. He had never asked Allah to reduce his burden. He had never asked Allah for anything to be lightened. He now reaches the age of 80 and he says that he turns to Allah. He turns to Him and he says that, oh Allah, Shaitan has afflicted me with weariness and lots of unhappiness and tribulation. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards his abd. How does he reward his abd? This is really amazing. He says to Jibreel to send him this message that, oh Ayub, kick your leg on the earth. Okay, he could hardly move. He was in such a bad, healthy state, but he manages just to kick his leg onto the earth. Immediately a spring gushes forth. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends another message through Jibreel that this spring is cool and it is full of goodness. So it's a spring for bathing and drinking. So this is what Nabi Ayub does. He douses his body with this spring and he drinks it. Immediately his whole body is restored. His skin, his flesh, all his limbs are restored. Not only that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, take your wife, his wife's name was Rahma, take her and go back to that town. Remember, he was kicked out from that town by the people of it. So go back there. He goes with his wife to the town. Remember, everything had been destroyed, including his family. What does he find? His house has been restored. His crops and his trees are back. And not only that, but his children are there as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then tells him about his continuous reward. He says that I will give you another 73 years to live, because that would match the time when the trials began. I will give you another 73 years to live, and I will double your children for you. Allahu Akbar. Because of his patience. And so this is what happens to him. Now, look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes him. This is the answer to the question. Who does Allah describe in the Quran with such praise because of their patience, and why? We know the why. Because of his enormous, fantastic patience that he showed during those years of trials and tribulations. How does Allah describe him? In Surah Sad, verse number 44. He says, Inna wajadnahu sabira. Indeed, we found him, Nabi Ayub, to be patient. Ni'mal abd, an excellent servant. Innahu awwab. He was someone who would return constantly to God. Amazing qualities in someone to be told like that, to be described like that by Allah as a servant, a paragon of servant for all of us to emulate and copy. Then a brilliant servant, of course, at the highest rank of Ibadur Rahman, bima sabaru, as the verse says. And then innahu awwab, he was someone who would always turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amazing qualities in a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now let's apply it to ourselves. Let's use this model, this role model for ourselves. So when we are placed in situations, let's try our best to emulate Nabi Ayyub's patience. And then inshallah we will be described in such terms as well. How do we do that? Well, we need to make sure that we are trusting in Allah's judgment, in His fate for us. We know that He has given everything, so He can take everything. It will all be a test. Just like Nabi Ayyub was a test. Are we going to pass it or are we going to fail it? He passed it with distinction and got amazing rewards and a description that is there for all times now, for every single person to look at and remember him. Christians regard Job, Nabi Ayyub, as a paragon of patience. We as Muslims regard Ayyub as a paragon of patience. Look how much he is remembered by billions of people, and his name will always be there in history. So inshallah, let's try to bear in mind what he did, and inshallah we will be following in the footsteps of this paragon of patience. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There's a request if mu'mineen can stand up and come forward with the recitation of 3 loud salawats. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Let's move on now to examine the third question, and that was, how many types of patience are there? Well, there is a very famous tradition from none other than Rasulul A'zam sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Where he says that there are 3 types of patience. As-sabru thalatha. There are 3 types of patience. Sabrun indal musiba, wa sabrun ala ta'a, wa sabrun indal ma'siyah. So there are these 3 types. The first type is patience in the face of adversity. So when people normally think of patience, they think about this type, right? Like what Nabi Ayyub encountered. In the face of adversity, trials and tribulations, all the unfortunate things that befall people. So this we can term as forbearance and fortitude. When somebody is in this position, they must have forbearance and fortitude and courage and strength to be patient. Then the second type is patience in obedience. In obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obedience is not easy. It requires this type of patience that we can call steadfastness. Right? Because when Allah wants us to do certain things, wake up early and perform the prayers, and then at all the other times, fast during sometimes the hottest of conditions, give money, 1/5 of it in His way, go for Hajj. Then what about when we get married? What about our transactions with people? What about the way we interact with people? What must we do? All of these things are not easy. It requires patience. So patience in obedience, steadfastness, commitment, determination to do what Allah wants us to do. And the third type is patience from sinning, which we can call a type of self-control. So we have temptations, whether it's real or online, like I've spoken before. These days, it becomes more and more online temptations, more and more online sinning. And we are bombarded with this everywhere, almost where we look. Online we look, there's sinful things all the time. With a few clicks, you can get to all sorts of sinful sites. Then outside, there's sinful behavior everywhere. So this requires patience, especially when you see certain people enjoying themselves seemingly. If only they knew what was coming for them, then that would be a different matter. But seemingly, they're enjoying themselves, reveling in all of this sinful behavior. That requires patience to self-control ourselves and not succumb to that temptation. So it's like self-control and restraint. So there are these three types of patience. Now, like I said, most people associate patience with that first type, isn't it? Trials and tribulations. But what about in the face of adversity? What about with regard to obedience of Allah and from sinning? Well, for this, I'd like to give an example. Another example of a great scholar, Ayatollah Al-Uzma Sayyid Hussein Tabatabai Burujardi, the great marja of his time. This will illustrate patience in obedience and patience from sinning. So it's very famously reported that he, in order to train his soul, his nafs, and to spiritually develop, he used this technique called mu'aqaba. This mu'aqaba means self-disciplining, right? You discipline yourself by appointing a punishment for yourself if you do something that you want to stop doing, a bad habit, all right? And this is something that we can all take up as well. So first of all, what does he do? What did he feel that was really holding him down and stopping his spiritual development? It was anger, all right? So he had made this nadar to himself, a vow, right? That if he ever gets angry without due cause, he will fast. But not just 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. He will fast for 1 year. All right? He will fast for 1 year if he gets angry without any good reason. So now one day he's teaching his high-level class in Burujard, and at that time there were so many students, high-ranking students, and he had a special dignity and status. So one of the students there raises an objection. Ayatollah Burujardi answers him. Then the student again objects and he argues with Ayatollah Burujardi. Ayatollah Burujardi, second time, he responds and answers the student. The third time he does it, Ayatollah Burujardi, with an annoyed tone, that's all it was. He says to him, "Be quiet, young man." That's what he says to him, right? Now, during that lesson, he's thinking about what he said. How could he have said that to this young student? You know what he does? After the class is over, in front of everyone, he calls this student over to him. He takes his hand, he bows down, he kisses his hand. He then gives him an abba, a cloak. He gives him some money, and he says to him, "Forgive the mistake of Burujardi." Not only that, but from the next day, what does he start doing? He starts fasting for 1 whole year. Just because he said that. And it wasn't even something that grave. So you see, my brothers and sisters, this is what is required, or this is what these great spiritual masters felt was required for them to progress spiritually. Whatever it took, they tried to do it in order to develop spiritually, to remove their bad traits, to gain good traits, like those traits of the Ibadur Rahman. And they felt it was something necessary for them to do. And so this is what, inshallah, we can do, a form of mu'aqaba, a form of self-disciplining. Of course, it has to be within the Sharia. It cannot go to extremes. Nobody is expecting that type of, nadar from us. But perhaps we can make some type of nadar, a 1-day fast, 3-day fast. Or, for example, we have the great scholar of akhlaq, Shaykh Ahmad Naraki, in Miraju Sa'ada, this wonderful book of Islamic ethics and spirituality, he talks about this. And he gives some examples of what people can do for this mu'aqabah, self-disciplining, self-punishing, and in order for them to develop. He says that, okay, you could do some difficult type of ibadah, like fasting. He gives the example of fasting. Or you could give something away that you like. Whenever we have to put our hands in our pockets and give, or give something that we like because of, the sake of Allah, in order to self-discipline us, definitely it will be very, very effective. He says that, for example, if somebody has eaten something haram, they could remain hungry for a while, right? Because it can't go beyond the bounds of the Sharia, of course, it can't go to extremes. And he gives another example. He says, let's say somebody has done ghibah in front of, let's say, Ahmad or Fatima. Then what they should do is praise that person in front of Ahmad and Fatima. So all of these type of things can be used in order to develop ourselves spiritually. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So there are these two exemplified in this story, these two types of sabr. Like I said, the normal one people associate with is that, with regards to trials and tribulations. But what did Ayatul Burujardi exemplify here? Sabr when it comes to obedience, isn't it? Because he had to keep the vows for the fasts for 1 year. Because when you keep a vow, another, it becomes wajib. If it's fulfilled, it's wajib to perform it. So he needed patience, definitely, during that year to fast. So that was the second type. Patience in obedience, but then patience from sinning. Okay, it wasn't a sin, but patience, what they regard as sins, or any behavior that takes them away from God. Remember, Ibadur Rahman are at different levels. For one person, it's just abstaining from basic sins. Others, they're way beyond that. It's not sinning that they need to abstain from. It's something which might be makruh, disapproved, or something that they feel is taking them or not getting them closer to God. So in this anecdote, we see the embodiment of those two types of patience. So now the final question that we want to try and address this evening is, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command us to be patient in the Quran? Well, for this, we need to turn to Surah Ali Imran, verse number 200, right? This is a fantastic verse. Anyone wants to develop in this beautiful attribute of patience should look at this in detail. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sbiru was-sabiru war-rabitu wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. Three amazing commands, first of all, that you who believe, so it's all of us, every single one of us, this is being addressed to us. Oh, you who believe, have patience, be patient, right? Then, sabiru. Now, he's already said isbiru. So what's the difference between that and sabiru? They sound very similar. We'll come to that. Then, rabitu. That means strengthen the relationships between yourselves. In fact, there are a few different interpretations of sabiru and rabitu, but the one that I will present this evening, which is a very good one, is rabitu, means strengthen your relationships with one another, and then have taqwa, wattaqullah la'allakum tuflihun. Have taqwa, and perhaps you will be prosperous. Right now, he says, in order to be prosperous, so that's the ultimate aim. And falah, tuflihun, in the verse, it means prosperity in this world and in the next. So if we have patience, if we do these things, inshallah, we'll have prosperity in this world and the next. So be patient. That means individually. All of us should be patient individually. That's the first command. The sabiru, which sounds very similar, because the form of it in Arabic grammar denotes an interaction with others, it can be taken to mean help others to be patient. Be patient among yourselves as a community. So even if you are patient, let's say someone in your community is not patient, either with regards to a musibah that's befallen them. Let's say a bereavement. It's very difficult. You are patient, share your patience with that person. Help him, support him, give him all the comfort that he needs. Perhaps get the help of others, relatives, family members, community members, scholars. Help that person. Sabiru means a communal type of patience. Or in obedience, maybe that person is not patient in obedience. He can't wake up for Salatul Fajr, let's say. He doesn't fast. He finds it very difficult to give khums. You help him to be patient in obedience. Or the third type, he cannot abstain from certain types of sin. Let's say he can't stop listening to haram music. He can't lower his eyes when he sees certain non-mahram people. And so help that person as much as you can. If you can't, get help from others. So that's sabiru. Rabitu, like I said, strengthen your relationships with one another in the community, and then inshallah you will be prosperous. So my dear brothers and sisters, this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to be patient in the Quran, by looking at that individual type of prosperity and patience, and the collective patience. Just because we are patient, we shouldn't just leave it there. Remember, the Ibadur Rahman don't just look at themselves, they want to be role models and leaders of others in spirituality. This is what we discussed last night. And they want to take the hand of others and lead them as well. In that process, we will also develop further and further. Don't think that if we give our time and energy and knowledge and experience to others, we won't benefit. Of course, we'll benefit a lot more than if we just kept it all to ourselves. So as a summary tonight, in our final discussion of the attributes of the Ibadur Rahman, we discussed the 14th and concluding attribute, which was patience. And we addressed these 4 questions. First of all, why is it regarded as the most important attribute of the Ibadur Rahman? Because the verse says they are given these ghurfa and high abodes because of the patience, and because without patience you can't possess the other 13 attributes. Then we looked at who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in such glowing terms in the Quran as being the paragon of patience. That is Nabi Ayyub. Why? Because of his exemplary demonstration of this attribute. Thirdly, what are the types? There are these 3 types: in the face of affliction, in obedience, and from sinning. And then finally, how does Allah command us to be patient? He tells us to be patient individually and collectively. That's when we'll inshallah attain falah, prosperity in this world. Inshallah, if we see it, alhamdulillah. Otherwise, we'll see it in the next world, alhamdulillah, or perhaps even in both worlds. Let's recite a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, protect and hasten the appearance of our Imam. Oh Allah, enable us to embody all 14 qualities and become your true servants. Oh Allah, enable us to be patient in all its forms. Oh Allah, forgive us and our forefathers for our sins. And oh Allah, bring relief to all those facing difficulty around the world. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdillah. Sallallahu alayka ya Ibna Rasulillah. Let's take our minds and our hearts to the camp of Abu Abdullah in Karbala on this night. What was happening in that camp on this night? Well, Umar ibn Sa'd wanted to attack Imam Hussein actually on the 9th. But then Abu Abdullah sends his loyal brother Abul Fazl Abbas to ask Umar ibn Sa'd for one more night. Why? Why does he want one more night? It's for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, perhaps on this night, we can pray to our Lord. We can recite du'as and we can seek forgiveness. And it is said that they stayed up all night in worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's also try to follow their example this night by engaging in worship as well. In fact, it's reported that they worshipped Allah so much that there was a very particular way the history books reports the noise that was coming from their camp. It's a very touching and eloquent description. Dawiyun ka dawiyin nahu. So that means there was a type of humming that was heard that from the camp that resembled the sound that a hummingbee makes. What a fantastic description. That was them engaging in their prayer, in their du'as, and in their istighfar. So now on this night, Abu Abdullah addresses his loyal companions. He says to them, I know of no companions better than my companions. And I know of no family members better than my family members. He addresses all his companions. He says, each one of you, take one of my family members and use the blackness of the night so that it hides you. And he wants them to go in the blackness of the night so that they would not be seen. They would not be embarrassed. He's giving them all the opportunity to leave. But then, does a single person leave? No one leaves. Instead, they express their loyalty and their commitment to their master, Abu Abdullah. Companions such as who? Companions such as Muslim ibn Awsajah. Muslim ibn Awsajah says that he will never leave. And then this companion, just as the others expressed in words what their loyalty and their commitment to Abu Abdullah on that night, on the plains of Karbala, how did they express it? They expressed it in actions. They expressed it in their sacrifice. Muslim ibn Awsajah, as he's breathing his last breath, when he was attacked, he turns round to his friend, Habib ibn Mudahir. He says to him, Oh Habib, all I want is for you to defend Imam Hussein until death. Companions such as Sa'id ibn Abdullah, again, when Abu Abdullah says, you can leave, take one of my members, use the blackness of the night to go and nobody will blame you. Look at his expression. He says, no, we will never leave you. That is only by words. But then on the day of Ashura, Sa'id ibn Abdullah, look how he expressed his loyalty in action. He was that human shield that stood before Abu Abdullah as he performed his Zuhr prayer. He took all the arrows so that his master could perform the prayer. It's reported that he had 13 arrows shot into his flesh. And as he fell, he turns to Abu Abdullah and he says, have I fulfilled my obligation, Abu Abdullah? These are the companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada. This is what they were doing on this night. And that's how they sacrificed themselves on the day of Ashura. Now, mu'mineen, let's turn ourselves to what happened on the day of Ashura, and one particular shaheed who we will remember on this night. So now, Abu Abdullah finds himself all alone. He looks to the left, there's no one there. He looks to the right, there's no one there. All of his family members have now been slaughtered, in addition to all the companions. Now he remembers, he knows that Ali Akbar has been cut into pieces. He knows that Qasim has been trodden under the horses. He knows that even the backbone of his support, Abul Fazl Abbas, lies on the banks of the Euphrates without any arms. Owner Muhammad have been slaughtered as well. Who is there left to help him? And now he recites this historical line, Hal min nasirin yansuruna. Is there there any helper to help us? هل من ذاب يذب عن حرم رسول الله? Is there any defender to defend the family of the Prophet? No one responds. But some people say there was a response. In one of the tents, there was a cradle, and that cradle rocked a little bit. That cradle, it was as if Ali Asghar, the 6-month-old son of Abu Abdullah, was giving a response to his father. It was as if he was saying, my father, don't forget me. I am also one of your soldiers. I will help you. Now, Abu Abdullah, it is reported that on the plains of Karbala, in fact, all the mothers had lost sons. Let's remember the brave mothers who had lost sons on the plains of Karbala. Al-Baneen had lost Abul Fadl Abbas. She had also lost 3 other sons. And Layla had lost Ali Akbar. Lady Zainab had lost Aun and Muhammad. Ramla had lost Qasim. But there was one mother left who still had a son, and that was Rabab. For she was the mother of the 6-month-old baby Ali Asghar. She was the only one. But now what would happen to her after her son would be lost as well? So now Abu Abdullah, he comes to the tent. Mu'mineen, these are very difficult moments for Sayyidul Shuhada, all alone. He only now wants to say farewell to Ali Asghar. He comes to the tent. He asks his family, bring me my child, bring me my child. They bring Ali Asghar to him. Some say that at that point Ali Asghar was martyred, but other reports have said that now he takes him in his arms. He hears Ali Asghar crying. He sees the tears flowing down his cheeks. Now he takes him to the enemy soldiers. Mu'mineen, you know what this means. You know that when he takes Ali Asghar to the enemy soldiers, this is the last soldier of Imam Hussein going on to the battlefield. This is the youngest soldier of Abu Abdullah going on to the battlefield. And just as all his other companions and soldiers had a battle cry, this young soldier of his also had a battle cry. But his battle cry was his crying out of thirst. So now Abu Abdullah, he says to the enemy soldiers that if you don't have mercy on me, then have mercy on this infant. At that point, Hurmala takes his arrow. He points it at the tender neck of Ali Asghar. Mu'mineen, you know what type of arrow he used. It's reported by some that it was a 3-pronged arrow. What were 3-pronged arrows used in those days? They were used to slaughter camels. Because the neck of a camel is so thick, they had to use such an arrow. Compare the neck of a camel to the tender neck of a 6-month-old child. Urmala takes the arrow. He points it at the neck of Ali Asghar. Now, Mu'mineen, you know in Arabic, whenever an animal is slaughtered, the word zibah is used. The reporter uses the same word to describe what the arrow did to Ali Asghar's neck. فَذَبَحَا, it slaughtered him. It slaughtered Ali Asghar. Now Abu Abdullah has to take Ali Asghar to Rabab. How can he do this? All the blood of Ali Asghar's neck, from his neck, is pouring onto the chest of Abu Abdullah. How can he show Rabab what's happened to their child? He goes to the tent. He can't face the Rabab. He comes back. He goes back to the tent. He comes back. He does that 7 times. As he does so, he recites, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ridhan bi qada'i wa tasliman li amri. Now eventually he goes to the tent. But now what does he do with his child? He takes the scabbard of his sword. He digs a tiny grave and he buries Ali Asghar in that grave. But mu'mineen, I ask you, just imagine how tiny that grave must have been. And now the question is, why did Abu Abdullah bury his youngest child like that? I can perhaps put forward 3 reasons. Perhaps there were 3 reasons. One is that so that the women and the children would no longer have to see such a tragic sight. The second reason is so that the tiny body of Ali Asghar would not be trampled under the horses like the other shuhada. And the third reason is perhaps so that unlike the other shuhada's heads, the tiny head of Ali Asghar would not be placed on top of a spear. Allah la'natullah laqawmi zalimin wa sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayyamun qalbin yanqalibun matam ya Hussein ya Hussein ya Hussein ya Hussein.
آتے ہیں اصغر علی خون میں نہائے ہوئے. آتے ہیں اصغر علی خون میں نہائے ہوئے. موت کی ہچکی لگی خون میں نہائے ہوئے. مٹھیاں دونوں بندھے سینے کے اوپر دھری, آنکھیں کھلی کچھ رکھی خون میں نہائے ہوئے. آتے ہیں اصغر علی خون میں نہائے ہوئے. موت کی ہچکی لگی خون میں نہائے ہوئے. مارتے ہیں دست و پا, ڈھونڈتے ہیں سر ننھا, جاتے ہیں پیش خدا خون میں نہائے ہوئے. ان کا ڈھلا ہے ہوا, دم بھی ہے اکھڑا ہوا, سینے میں الجھا ہوا خون میں نہائے ہوئے. آتے ہیں اصغر علی خون میں نہائے ہوئے. آنکھیں کبھی کھول کے شیخ کی طرف یاس سے, روکے ہو کیا دیکھتے خون میں نہائے ہوئے. آتے ہیں اصغر علی خون میں نہائے ہوئے. گل ہوا ہے بیبیوں آتے ہیں اصغر علی آخری تسلیم کو خون میں نہائے ہوئے، جان کے زندہ پسر بانو چلی لینے کو، رہ گئی بس دیکھ کر خون میں نہائے ہوئے، رو کے کہا خیر ہو جان پہ کیا کر گئے، آتے ہیں یوں کس لیے خون میں نہائے ہوئے، آتے ہیں اصغر علی خون میں نہائے ہوئے، زندگی اس ماں کی کیا جن کا پسر چاند سے، آتے ہیں یوں بلا خون میں، آتے ہیں اصغر علی۔ اے مومن جب خون میں ڈوبا ہوا آیا اصغر کا جنازہ، اے مومن جب خون، اے مومن جب خون میں ڈوبا ہوا آیا اصغر کا جنازہ، شبیر نے رو رو کے کلیجے سے لگایا اصغر کا جنازہ، جب خون میں ڈوبا ہوا آیا اصغر کا جنازہ، جب خون میں ڈوبا ہوا آیا اصغر کا جنازہ، خیمے کی طرف روتے ہوئے آئی شہیدی شرمندہ و غمگین، خیمے کی طرف روتے ہوئے آئی شہیدی شرمندہ و غمگین، کسی آس سے منہ پھیر کے بانو کو دکھایا اصغر کا جنازہ،
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا والی اصغر کا، جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا والی اصغر کا، جل گئی خیمے جلا جھولا والی اصغر کا، جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا والی اصغر کا، جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا والی اصغر کا، جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا والی اصغر کا، عمر بھر ماں کو پڑھا نوحہ والی اصغر کا، جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا 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 والی اصغر کا، ہائے بے شیر کی قامت سے برتی تیر تیر، ہائے بے شیر کی قامت سے برتی تیر وہ، جس نے چڑھا اے گلا سوکا والی اصغر کا، جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا والی اصغر کا، جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا والی اصغر کا، جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا والی اصغر کا، تیرے کی لگتا ہے گردن اڈلنا سوچو، تیرے گلتے ہوئے گردن کی ہو دلنا سوچو باپ کی ہاتھوں پتا سجدہ ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا چل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا نہ نصر نے سے کس طرح سوچو نہ نصر نے سے کس طرح سے سوچو قبر خود سے کتا کتا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا اے اصغر کی صدا نیز سے اماں اماں اے اصغر کی صدا نیز سے اماں اماں دیکھ لو وعدہ پورا پورا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا اوٹر ماں ایک کچھ کرنے لگے ابو کا اور تیرا میں کچھ کرنے لگی ابو کا اینوں کے نیزے پہ جو سر کا دکھا علی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا ماں کے سینے سے ہوئے دفن ہم شاہ کے لیے ہم کے سینے میں ہوئے دفن ہم شاہ کے لیے ایک سکینہ کے لاشا لاشا علی اصغر کا جل گئی خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا من گئی ڈوب پہ ماں پہلو جس کو کولو جس گن چھوٹا گلے بولو جس کو کولو رک جھولا مرتا علی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا ایک اجڑی ہوئی مادر دل سے کے لیے ایک جڑی ہوئی ہوئے مادر دل سے کے لیے اور ازاں خان نام ہے جھولا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا اے مظہر کی دعا نسلوں میں جاری ازاں اے مظہر کی دعا نسلوں میں جاری ازاں دیتے فرحاں ایتے تو صدقہ علی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا جل گئے خیمے جلا جھولا ولی اصغر کا پھول نہ پائی مادر یا حسین
کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو
شہزادی
ردا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا 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 دو
ماں دیکھ نہ لے سر کو کہیں برسر نیزا ماں دیکھ نہ لے سر کو کہیں برسر نیزا اس پر سر اصغر ہے ذرا دور
ہٹا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو
یہ شام کا بازار محمد کی نواسی
یہ شام کا بازار محمد کی نواسی
یہ شام کا بازار محمد
کی نواسی
یہ شام کا بازار محمد کی نواسی یہ شام کا بازار محمد کی نواسی اریاں سر اسلام اریاں سر اسلام ہے چادر تو اڑا دو
کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو
اس دن کے لیے پالا تھا کیا بنت نبی نے اس دن
پال کیا بنت نبی نے
اس دن کے لیے پالا تھا کیا بنت
نبی نے
شبیر کا سر کاٹ کے
نیزے پہ چڑھا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو ایسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو
گھبرا کے تماچوں سے یہ کہتی تھی سکینہ گھبرا کے
تماچوں سے یہ کہتی تھی سکینہ
گھبرا کے تماچوں سے یہ کہتی
تھی سکینہ
اچھی پھوپھی اماں
میری امّو کو بلا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو
کیا تم میں کوئی صاحب اولاد نہیں ہے
کیا تم میں کوئی صاحب اولاد نہیں ہے
کیا تم میں کوئی صاحب
اولاد نہیں ہے
بچی ہے نہ اس طرح تماشوں کی
سزا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو
آزادی کونین کھلے
کیسے ہو مسلمان چراغوں کو بجھا دو یا حسین 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 یا حسین
زخم دل کے دکھاؤں میں کیسے زخم دل کے دکھاؤں میں کیسے تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں میں کیسے اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا لاش اکبر پیشہ جب پہنچے دل کو ہاتھوں سے تھام کر بولے تیری فرقت میں اے علی اکبر آگ دل میں میرے لگا دی ہے آگ دل کی بجھاؤں میں کیسے آگ دل کی بجھاؤں میں کیسے تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں میں کیسے اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا تو ہے کریل جوان اے بیٹا باپ تیرا ضعیف ہے کتنا نور آنکھوں کا ہو گیا رخصت مجھ کو آتا نہیں نظر خیمہ لے کے خیموں میں جاؤں میں کیسے لے کے خیموں میں جاؤں میں کیسے تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں میں کیسے اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر والا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر جس نے 18 سال پالا تھا کیسے دیکھے گی وہ تیرا لاشا تیری شادی کا تھا جسے ارماں کیسے جیلے گی وہ تیرا صدمہ تیری ماں کو بتاؤں میں کیسے تیری ماں کو بتاؤں میں کیسے تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں میں کیسے اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر دیکھ آیا ہے قاصد صغرا راہ تکتی ہے وہ دکھی بہنا تجھ کو بیمار نے بلایا ہے وعدہ صغرا کیا کیوں بلا ڈالا غم یہ دل سے لگاؤں میں کیسے غم یہ دل سے لگاؤں میں کیسے تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں میں کیسے اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر لطف جینے میں اب کہاں اکبر دل سے اٹھ ہی ہے یہ فغاں اکبر صبح عاشور دی تھی جو تو نے خور لائے گی وہ اذاں اکبر تیری صورت بھلاؤں میں کیسے تیری صورت بھلاؤں میں کیسے تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں میں کیسے اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا ایسی غربت میں منہ نہیں موڑو میں ہوں تنہا مجھے نہ یوں چھوڑو کیا گزرتی ہے باپ کے دل پر غم زدہ دل کو یوں نہیں توڑو اپنی غربت دکھاؤں میں کیسے اپنی غربت دکھاؤں میں کیسے تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں میں کیسے اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر اوالا اکبر اکبر میرا سحر زخم دل کے دکھاؤں میں کیسے زخم دل کے دکھاؤں میں کیسے تیرا لاشا اٹھاؤں میں کیسے یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا پردہ دنیا
You want pani?
گھر سے باہر بھی نہ آنے والی گھر سے باہر بھی نہ آنے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے جس نے بابا سے چرائے تھے کئی بار اسیر جس نے بابا سے چرائے تھے کئی بار اسیر قیدی آزاد کرانے والی قیدی آزاد کرانے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو میں زینب جلتے خیموں سے اٹھا لائی عباس کے بعد جلتے خیموں سے اٹھا لائی عباس کے بعد علی عبید کو بچانے والی علی عبید کو بچانے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب دنیا کو سکھانے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب گھر سے باہر بھی نہ آنے والی گھر سے باہر بھی نہ آنے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو دین کی خاطر یہ بی بی سالار بنی، دین کی خاطر یہ بی بی سالار بنی، بن کے عباس دکھانے والی، بن کے عباس دکھانے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے، آئی بازاروں میں زینب گھر سے باہر بھی نہ آنے والی، گھر سے باہر بھی نہ آنے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی، پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب، اپنے سینے پہ سکینہ کو زندانوں میں، اپنے سینے پہ سکینہ کو زندانوں میں، باد بھائی کے سلانے والی، باد بھائی کے سلانے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی، گھر سے باہر بھی نہ آنے والی، گھر سے باہر بھی نہ آنے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا، آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب ننگ سر پڑتی رہی خطبے بازاروں میں، ننگ سر پڑتی رہی خطبے بازاروں میں، کسر دشمن کو ہلانے والی، کسر دشمن کو ہلانے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی، آئی بازار پردہ دنیا کو سکھانے والی، آئی بازاروں میں زینب، یا حسین حسین یا حسین، ڈھل گیا سورج شمع جلی، ننھا میرا اصغر کہاں گیا رے، ڈھل گیا سورج جلی، ننھا میرا اصغر کہاں گیا رے، ڈھل گیا سورج ما جلی، ننھا میرا اصغر گیا رے، بانو پکاری کھوک جلی، ننھا میرا اصغر کہاں گیا رے، ڈھل گیا سورج، ننھا میرا اصغر، رات اندھیری سنسان بن، ڈھونڈوں کہاں تجھے اے گل بدن، رات اندھیری سنسان بن، ڈھونڈوں کہاں تجھے اے گل بدن، رو رو پکاری ماں دل جلی، ننھا میرا اصغر کہاں گیا رے، ڈھل گیا سورج، ننھا میرا اصغر کہاں گیا رے، ڈھل گیا سورج، ننھا میرا وقت مدد ہے مشکل کشا مشکل کرو حل بہر خدا وقت مدد ہے مشکل کشا مشکل کرو حل بہر خدا تم ہی بتاؤ مولا علی ننھا میرا اصغر کہاں گیا رے ڈھل گیا سورج نکلنا خیمے سے زینب نہ خیمے سے زینب کہیں خدا کے لیے نکلنا خیمے سے زینب نکلنا خیمے سے زینب کہیں خدا یہ ابھی تو زندہ ہے غازی ابھی تو زندہ ہے غازی تیری رضا کے لیے نکلنا خیمے سے زینب نکلنا خیمے سے زینب کہیں خدا میں پانی لاتا ہوں دریا سے تو اجازت دے میں پانی لاتا ہوں دریا سے تو اجازت دے خدا نے بازو دیے ہے خدا نے بازو دیے ہے مجھے وفا کے لیے نکلنا خیمے سے زینب نکلنا خیمے سے زینب کہیں خدا کے لیے میں روز بازو کٹا دوں گا تیرے پردے پر میں روز بازو کٹا دوں گا تیرے پردے پر تو اپنے نانا سے کہنا تو اپنے نانا سے کہنا میری شفا کے لیے نکلنا خیمے سے زینب نکلنا خیمے سے زینب کہیں خدا کے لیے یا حسین 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 سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليك يا علي المرتضى السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا مولى وابن مولى السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء السلطان أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان الأمان 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 السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وأينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توأ وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين